Elizabeth.
Uh-huh. I see Christy Innes, who was instrumental in making me do something about Hotspot's predicament. I don't know if she realizes that, but she's more responsible than I am. I see Ruthie Byrne, who is, among other things, a member of our advisory board.
Hi, Peter and everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
So Hashmat, you'll have a good audience.
Wonderful. Well, I see that it's 12:02. Maricela, should we get started or should we give it another minute or so for people to join in?
I think now is a good time to get started, and I'll let in anybody else. And just so everybody knows, this video will be recorded and available for you via YouTube.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. My name is Lori Phipps. I'm an adjunct professor here at Fairleigh Dickinson at the Metro campus. I've been teaching for about 5 years at FDU. Prior to that, I was an advisor to the American ambassador at the UN for over 20 years. And one of the issues that I dealt with at the UN was women's rights, and women's rights in Pakistan, or rather in Afghanistan, were a very big issue for quite a while. And so I'm delighted to have Mr. Hashmat Vajdani with us today, and also Professor Peter Woolley. And I'd like to turn the floor over for a few minutes to Professor Woolley. So it's he who was instrumental in bringing Mr. Vajdani into FDU as a graduate student. And so, Professor Woolley, I give you the floor. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And what I want to do is just give you a little background in case you don't have it. A little background of Hashmat Vajdani. And it's an interesting story. And a little bit of the story is now U.S. history. A little bit of that story is that the United States intervened in Afghanistan for a period of 2 decades. And we had this hope of somehow pacifying the country. I think that's the word we would use. And as you know, that effort was not entirely successful, to say the least. In fact, there's a very good book about it called The Afghanistan Papers. If you want to know what went wrong in Afghanistan, I recommend very strongly the book called The Afghanistan Papers, a fairly recent collection of eyewitness, that is to say, mostly American eyewitness accounts of what they saw and did in Afghanistan. And almost to a person, they said, this is not going well, and we shouldn't be here. And as you also know, part of that history is that a presidential administration, the former presidential administration, made an agreement primarily with the Taliban to withdraw from Afghanistan, to withdraw American troops from Afghanistan, and gave it about a year's lead time. The subsequent administration followed through with that agreement, giving the withdrawal date at least 2 delays to allow for more planning. But what happened next, as you also know, is that while Americans and frankly, every agency in the United States government was expecting the Afghan government to continue to function without American forces, the opposite happened. There was a very quick collapse. And the result was, in part, tens of thousands of Afghans who, in effect, collaborated with the United States, supported the United States, worked for the United States, either directly for our armed forces or for our State Department or Department of Commerce, or who worked indirectly for American-sponsored, American-financed agencies, were left stranded under a Taliban regime. One of those people was Hashmat, with his wife and with 3 young children. Now, the truth is, even though Professor Phipps said I recruited Hashmat to the program, it was Christy Innes, who was in this audience, who recruited Hashmat to the program. Hashmat contacted us, I believe. Christy, you can correct me. Christy, actually, the original plan was for Hashmat to come in person to the United States to join the master's program in global affairs. But a little thing called COVID intervened and made that impossible. So instead, we matriculated Hashmat and allowed him to attend remotely. And the MA in Global Affairs, until that point, of course, was entirely in person, and it was entirely made up of people with A1 visas. That is to say, people who are here with diplomatic status. We felt strongly that Hashmat certainly qualified to join that group. And of course, he did join that group, and he was a very successful student. He continues to be matriculated, by the way. And so he will officially graduate, I think, in May. We very much hope that he will be in person in May to graduate with his classmates. And we hope that you will be there too. So it was really Christy Innes who not only matriculated him into the program, but when things fell apart in Kabul, my recollection is she called me and said, "Isn't there something we can do?" And my recollection is that I thought, no, there is nothing we can do. No, we're a bunch of people in New Jersey living in leafy suburbs. There's nothing we can do. And I don't know whether I had the thought next or I had the thought the next day, but I did think, wait a minute, I know a guy, because that's what we say in New Jersey, right? We say, hey, I know a guy. And it's true. I've been in New Jersey long enough now that I can say I know a guy. Well, I know a guy who was in what you might call the gray market for much of his life. And as an operator in the gray market, he also met a lot of other people in the gray market. And he met a lot of people working for governments in the gray market. And so I was able to ask him, do you know a guy? And in fact, he did know a guy. And we were able then to use these contacts to have Hashmat, in effect, removed from the terrible situation in Kabul, where in fact the Taliban would come to his house looking for him, would come to his parents' house looking for him. And he was able to make it across the border, and we were able to identify a safe house for him. And with the help of many people, including a number of people in this audience right now, we have been able to sustain him in that safe house. So he gets shelter for himself and for his family. He gets food. He gets a few other amenities, I understand. But mainly he stays out of sight and he stays safe. And that is in part due to his very good sense and his persistence and his ability to keep his spirits up and hold his family together. And that's in part because a number of people in this audience and a number of people who are not here today stepped forward with a helping hand. And I want to express my profound appreciation for all the people who have stepped up. And that all began with Christy Innes saying, isn't there something we can do, right? So that turns out to be a pretty good question. I recommend that question to everyone. And I'm very glad to see Hashmat here, in effect here, and safe and looking very handsome. And I look forward to hearing him speak.
Thank you so much, Professor Woolley, for that really fascinating bit of background. Before we delve into the human rights situation and a brief historical background about Afghanistan, Mr. Vajdani, could you please tell us a few words about your own background and your connection to FDU, expanding on what Professor Woolley has said? Mr. Vajdani.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Professor Pips. First of all, I would like to say uh, thank you so much, Honorable Dr. Wali, and distinguished participant, my professors, and thank you so much for participating and today for me tonight in this great event, and from the FDO for making this opportunity that I share my ideas. I would like to tell you a very short story of how can I evacuated from Afghanistan to Pakistan. As Mr. Professor Wali said, I don't have any word to say him. Thank you so much, Professor, and those who are helped me so far and saved the life of 5 people: me, my wife, and 3 my kids. This is the humanity. And this is very important for me. I don't have any word to say thank you for all of these things that they do so far for me. When the government has collapsed in Afghanistan, before of that, I was working as a human rights defender, as a journalist in Afghanistan. So on that time, I was working with my friends, with the networks, to promote, to teach people about the human rights, women's rights, and I was working for education. Recently, I was working with the USIP, and we are working on a very important project, which was about the reintegration and the future peace process. But unfortunately, after the collapse of government, all of these programs were stopped, and the important day, which is the collapse, I had an interview on that day with one of the national media, and I was prepared like that, like today, suits, ties, everything. When I came out from the media, all of the people in the city, they were running away. I asked them why. They told me that the Taliban entered to some areas of the city. So this was the sentence which unbelievable for me, because in the morning we had government, but after 2 or 3 hours we don't have anything. I find a car and I sit in the car, which was taxi. The driver told me, dear friend, try to take off your coats and your tie, because in a few kilometers up to my home, in the way there is a Taliban, and they have checkpoints. When I arrived to home, so there was, gunfire as well. So at that time, when I lose everything, I just thinking with myself, what will be happened? Because 2 or 3 days ago of the collapse of the government, I lose one of my best friends, and the Taliban killed him in front of their house. 1 week ago, they are come 2 times in front of my house as well. But our neighbors told us there is unknown people in front of your house. On that time, I was thinking, because in the first of the term of the Taliban, they entered to some houses, especially in Mazar, they killed a lot of people. So at that time, I was thinking, what will be happened? I received for the first time a message in my WhatsApp, which was very, very important message. It was Dr. Wali. And he asked me about my situation. What's happened with you? So this message was the beginning of this journey. After that, I received the other message from Mr. Chris Annis, who is right now in this program, and also Professor Yuri. I received these messages. They motivated me and gave me a lot of energy. And after one day, Professor Peter and another friends make this opportunity that I leave my home and go to the safe house. So I spent 5 days in the safe house. After that, me and my family and my 3 kids, we start our journey from Kabul to Kandahar. We spent whole of the night in the way. And the checkpoints, when Taliban entered to the buses, it was very strange. I saw for the first time their faces. It was very dangerous faces on that time. And my daughter, Sarah, She is 4 years old, and she put me in my chest and hugged me tight. She told me, which is never forget this sentence, which she told me. She told me, I afraid. It was the middle of the night that we go to Kandahar. In the morning, we arrived to Kandahar, and we left the Kandahar to Spin Boldak, and then crossed the border to Pakistan. The important thing which has happened in the border, there was a Pakistani officer, which belonged to the military of Pakistan. He see me very specifically and asked me, where do you want to go? I told him I go to Pakistan. And I don't know. He told me go. And we arrived to Pakistan, and Professor Peter and the other friends, they support me financially for 2 years here in Pakistan. And right now, when I'm in Pakistan, I'm safe. I'm a little bit happy because my case process also become a little bit serious. So I hope that one day I arrive to US, and I try to do something, especially to those friends who helped me during of these 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that compelling and chilling story. I'm so sorry you've had to go through these personal experiences. Professor Woolley has given us a bit of background about the Taliban and about the history of Afghanistan, but I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit. Some of our audience are made up of undergraduates who presumably don't have a great deal of background knowledge about Afghan politics. And I wonder if you could tell us a bit about the background and the nature of the Taliban and their beliefs. Thank you.
Taliban, ideologically, they are Islamic extremism group. There is no difference between the first term of Taliban and the second term of Taliban. In the first term of Taliban, there was no media, and there was home fighting in Afghanistan. When they entered to Afghanistan, they killed a lot of people on that time. In the second term of Taliban right now, after the collapse of the previous government, we can't see any difference to this group. Ideologically, they have their own definition from the Islam, but they say we try to bring Sharia in Afghanistan. When you ask them, the Sharia in Islam, which you have your own definition, and the rules that you have right now in Afghanistan, they're the opposite of Islam. So they said, no, we bring the Sharia in Afghanistan, and all over the world, Afghanistan is the only Islamic country that we bring Sharia to this country. So ideologically, Taliban, they believe on pure Islam. But in the reality, they want Islam for the Afghanistan people, not for themselves. For example, when the Taliban came to Afghanistan, the majority of their commanders, they do for the second, third, and fourth time marriage in Afghanistan. They have their own definition for the right of women. For example, their ideology, there is no constitution in Afghanistan right now. They have just one manifest, which is published by the Ministry of Justice in Afghanistan. Who published this manifest as Mr. Abdul Hakim Haqqani. So they just try to learn from this manifest and create new rules for Afghanistan. The definition of Taliban for the women and girls is that the women and girls just produce for us kids and just be in our houses. This is the definition of the Taliban. But some of the Taliban, which is very, very low level, they are changed a little bit. So they want education for girls, and also they want that the women and girls, we should give him the right to work in government and also in some organizations. So there is no difference we see between the first period and the second period of the Taliban.
Thank you very much. Another thing perhaps you can put into historical perspective for us is the role of the United States in your country. As Professor Woolley mentioned, the U.S. was involved militarily and in nation building efforts for over nearly 20 years between the ousting of the Taliban in 2001 and their resumption of power in 2021. Can you tell us a little bit about how you see the role of the United States in Afghanistan?
One of the important things which is done by the United States, you know, in the first period of the Taliban, which is led by the Mullah Omar, who was the founder of Taliban in 1994. So on that time, Mullah Omar have different ideas and different political ideas on that time. The US role in Afghanistan was that when the US came to invasion to Afghanistan, so on that time, as I mentioned, millions of girls were not allowed to go to school in the previous term of the Taliban. When the US came to Afghanistan, the majority of these girls find the right to go to school, to jobs. In the 20 years, which we say the bright term of Afghanistan. In the US invasion in Afghanistan bring a lot of changes in our country. For example, I was a refugee in Pakistan on that time. When I go to Afghanistan, I became educated. I graduated from university as well. Like me, thousands and millions of girls and boys find the opportunity to go to school, to go to university, to find scholarships. Beside of that, for the first time, we find the experience of democracy in Afghanistan. We had 2 or 3 times election of presidential. And beside of that, we had for the first time the parliament. All of these things happened during the when the United States started their invasion in Afghanistan. So on that time, up to the Taliban regroup in the border of Afghanistan, between Afghanistan and Pakistan. After 10 years, they become very active and they start their activities in Afghanistan. So they make a very, very important groups. They start attacks and they capture some territories in Afghanistan. So these things happen after the 10 years. But United States start their first dialogue, which was indirect in 2010 with the Taliban. So on that time, up to now, there is no one thinking that one day will Taliban once again capture Afghanistan and they will rule Afghanistan. No one thinking about that. But the United States policy changed after 2010. And the Taliban also motivated to capture the other areas of Afghanistan. So these were the things that in 2014, they once again start negotiation with the Taliban. And fortunately, in 2021, we lose everything in Afghanistan. And once again, Taliban captured that country. I think United States spent billions of dollars. And I think about 2,000, the United States forces also killed in Afghanistan. But once again, we came on the point where the United States start their mission in Afghanistan. So far, as today's figure also had a report that the United States in these 2 years sent millions of dollars to Afghanistan once again. And most of these aids captured by some leaders of the Taliban as well.
Thank you, Mr. Vajdani, for telling us about that time. I'm aware that there was a new constitution that was adopted in 2004, and as you say now, it's no longer in use. but there was a flowering of women's rights during those 20 years, with seats being set aside for women in local political ruling councils and at the regional level. And as you say, education for women and girls really took off. It's so distressing now that the Taliban has come back and shut all of that down. One of the things that's also been shut down, in addition to women's rights, of course, is the rights of journalists and human rights defenders, such as you. Journalists, both male and female, have suffered censorship, arrests, and threats to their safety, as you're well aware. According to the U.S. Department of State Annual Report on Human Rights in Afghanistan, some 60% of journalists, almost 7,000 individuals, are now unemployed, and 40% of media outlets have closed. You yourself are a journalist who has fled to Pakistan. Can you please tell us more about the restrictions on journalists and media in general in Afghanistan, as well as the difficulties you may have personally faced as a journalist? Thank you.
One of the important achievements during of 20 years in Afghanistan, it's the media in Afghanistan. We had about 600 media in Afghanistan before the collapse of governments, which is television, radios, newspaper, websites, these things. And about 12,000 journalists we have, which is male and female. When the Taliban entered to Afghanistan and took over Afghanistan, the first thing which they have done, when they arrived to Afghanistan, they removed the board from the Ministry of Women Affairs. Instead of this ministry, they start their activity by the name of Ministry for the Propagation of Virtue and Prevention. In the media, as I mentioned as well, Taliban have totally controlled the media in Afghanistan. 4 ministries control these media. The first one, the Interior Ministry. The second was the Ministry of Culture and Information. The third one is the Taliban Intelligence. And the fourth one, Ministry of Propagations. They have members to control all the media in Afghanistan. First, they start and tell all of the media, those female journalists or presenters in the media who would like to present or who would like to work as a journalist, they should be covered their faces with the mask. Most of the time, the Taliban leader didn't give information to the female journalist. One of my female journalist friend told me that they invited for a program in Mazar-e-Sharif, which is north of Afghanistan. She told me when the Taliban come to the program, they told to the host person that the female journalist should be in the other room, not with the male journalist. She told me when they send us to the other room, up to the end of the program, we are not allowed to go outside to write our report. Most of the time, the Taliban enter to the live discussions in the media. Some of the time they told to the media, don't invite the guest to your live program that those who speak against us. If you invite this kind of guest in your media, so you will be fine from our side. When sometime happened an explosion in Afghanistan, the Taliban told to the media, first you confirm with us, it's suicide attack, it's balloon gas explosion, or how many casualties. So the Taliban control totally the medias. One of the important experience which I have, it was 1 month ago, I have the discussion in media. There was a pro-Taliban as well as a guest. When I speak against them, this pro-Taliban told me in a live discussion that we know where are you. And it's very easy for us to target you. You know, how can they treat every person in the media? They totally control the media. Right now, most of the journalists leave the country. Most of the medias, 50% of the medias in Afghanistan, they stop their activities. because the Taliban said every program which you publish or which you broadcast from your media should be by the permission of us. There is not any drama. There is not any movie in Afghanistan right now. There is not any song in the media, nothing. Just there is a discussion of the Taliban, and most of the people, they did not watch the television, especially those television who are currently under the control of the Taliban. So there is not freedom of expression in Afghanistan. There is not individual media in Afghanistan, freedom media, because all of them under the control of the Taliban.
This is a very chilling report. And without freedom of expression and freedom of speech and freedom of the media, it's impossible for citizens in a country to really understand what's going on and to understand and evaluate their situation. But of course, there is no elections being held. It's not as though anyone has the opportunity to choose their government. The Taliban has imposed their rule upon Afghanistan. From the point of view of a woman, I think it must be just incredibly difficult to try to work as a journalist if you're not allowed to be in the same room as the men that you're interviewing, if you're not allowed to be in the same room as the male journalist with whom you're collaborating, if you have to go on screen totally covered with a burqa and only your eyes visible. It must be very difficult to perform as a woman journalist, and it's quite understandable why so many have left. You currently being in Pakistan, I understand that you have won a journalism award in 2020. Can you tell us a little bit about that journalism award that you were that you earned? Thank you.
When I arrived to Pakistan on the first day or months, I was under pressure. So, and I was also afraid because, you know, the Taliban had a very close relationship with the Pakistan, especially during of the 20 years, because most of the leadership of Taliban were in Pakistan. So after 2 or 3 months, I talked to some of my friends, tried to make an organization to support freedom of expression in Afghanistan and to support media in Afghanistan. So for the first time, we create an organization by the name of Federation of Afghan Journalists in Exile. And with this organization, we try to make their chapters in Iran and also in Turkey as well. I became the spokesperson of this federation. And the only hope of this organization was that we have the journalists who are in Pakistan, male and female journalists, and beside of that, to find a solution to define freedom of expression in Afghanistan. So these were the things that we work on that being in Pakistan. In Pakistan, we make this organization right now. This federation have about 200 Afghan journalists being in Pakistan as a member, which is male and female. And most of the time, these members try to have discussion with the medias, especially with those medias who are out of Afghanistan. And they participate on discussions to support freedom of expression in Afghanistan. Because, you know, right now, in the international level, all of the news are and reports about the Ukraine situation, and also right now Palestine and Israel. And there is no any important report about Afghanistan, what's going on right now in Afghanistan, because all of these media just cover these countries. The only aim of this federation, which we create being in Pakistan, was that to support freedom of expression of Afghanistan, and also to raise our voice about the violations who are happened in Afghanistan, human rights violation, women rights violation, and the restriction on media in Afghanistan.
Thank you very much. One of the things that's happening in Afghanistan that perhaps doesn't get enough media and international attention is that Afghanistan has a relatively high rate of maternal mortality. How do the current restrictions on women, such as requiring a woman to have a male relative escort her whenever she leaves her house, impact on women's health care? Are pregnant women able to visit doctors and midwives? Are women obliged to only receive health care from other women? Are there enough women doctors to provide the care that half the population needs? It'd be very interesting to hear your thoughts on this, women's health care issue.
The Taliban promised the United States and international community during the peace dialogue in Doha. They promised the international community that we respect the women's rights. The Taliban said we allowed the girls and women to work, and also the girls, we will allow them to study up to PhD level. They promised during the peace negotiation with the United States, international community, and Doha. But when they talk over in Afghanistan, they forget all of these things. As you mentioned, the Taliban have their own rule. They said women do not go outside of the home without any mahram, especially when they want to go up to 15 or 16 kilometers away. They should have one of their relatives as a mahram. And at the same time, we have another problems, and the ministries and the health section as well. When there is not any lady to go to school, how can we find a lady doctor for them? This is the big problem. The Taliban also told to our international organizations that you didn't give the opportunity of job for the ladies or for the female workers. So these are the problems in Afghanistan. And health situation, we have a big problems. Most of the time they allowed the pregnant women to go to hospital. But the problem is that if they continue like that, maybe in the future, we will don't have a lady doctor in the hospitals. And it will be a big problem for the Afghanistan, especially for the women.
Thank you. Another restriction on women that I'm aware of is that the Taliban has removed women judges, lawyers, and prosecutors from their positions in the court system. And women are no longer allowed to bring complaints before the courts. University and high school, secondary school education, as you've mentioned, is prohibited for women. Shelters for battered women have been closed under the Taliban regime, and the shelter's employees and advocates fighting against domestic violence have been persecuted. Do you see an impact on the amount of domestic violence against women and a rise in impunity for those who batter their wives?
The Taliban start very systematically with a mechanism, restriction on women in Afghanistan. First they come, they ban the girls to go to secondary school. After a few months, when the people of Afghanistan were thinking that the Taliban changed, they start another restriction. They ban the women and girls from going to universities. After that, they ban the girls to the primary schools as well. At the same time, they remove the women and girls from working in the government sectors. As you mentioned, like they were judges, they were prosecutors, so they were liars. So tell them that we don't need you anymore. Most of these prosecutors, these judges, leave the country and they came to Pakistan and they went to foreign countries. At the same time, the Taliban also banned the girls from working in international organizations as well. As I told you, they work very systematically. At the end, recently, the recent restriction of the Taliban was that they told all of the beauty salons should stop their working. About 1,400 beauty salons were active in Afghanistan. So they stopped the women activities in these beauty salons and they closed all of them. When the people asked them why, they said they are against the Sharia and against the Islamic rule. Right now, most of these female who are the owner of beauty salons, they go to Iran and they come to Pakistan. And they have their own beauty salon right now here. The only thing which is right now in Afghanistan for the women and girls is oxygen. The Taliban try to stop the oxygen also for the females and women in Afghanistan.
Thank you very much for explaining all of that. I'd like to turn back to Professor Woolley and see if he has any questions that he might like to pose to you. Professor Woolley? You're muted, Professor.
Yes, I do have a question. And you may have heard this attitude before, and I'm interested to get your reaction. So I think there are a lot of people who are very distressed in the United States or Europe and other places where they were interested in Afghanistan succeeding. And I think there are a lot of people who feel as though the entire effort was for naught, was for nothing. That the United States spent $1 trillion, lost several thousand lives, inflicted collateral damage in Afghanistan, did a lot of good, but it was all very temporarily. And they think that perhaps it was better if we were never there. So my question is, do you think that the United States will have had a lasting positive influence on Afghanistan, even if now the Taliban is suppressing women, even if now the Taliban is turning the clock back to the 12th century? Do you think there's any hope that the United States had a lasting and positive influence on the people of Afghanistan?
Thank you so much, Professor. I think personally that the United States have influence on Taliban, because if the United States didn't send them weekly millions of dollars, which the Taliban said that this is the humanitarian aid and it belongs to the people of Afghanistan. So if the United States put some serious restriction, especially on the leadership of Taliban, I think they will accept. But at the same time, as the Taliban said, there is 2 or 3 groups in the Taliban. Some of the Taliban are very extremism. They said, we didn't talk to the United States. We didn't allow the girls and the women to go to school, to go to work. So if the United States put some pressure on the Taliban as a positive rule, I think they will accept. Because most of the Taliban leadership, in some discussion, they said, if the United States opened their embassy in Afghanistan, all of the world will open their embassies in Afghanistan. So at the same time, they said that we want a good relationship with the US. So if the US put some distraction through some organization, serious distraction on Taliban, I think they will accept. But at the same time, there's also oppositions in Afghanistan, like NRF. If they support these groups, I think the Taliban will change in the future.
Well, that's a very hopeful prognosis to
Yeah.
hear you say that you think that the Taliban will change in the future. I certainly hope that that there's some validity to that. I want to turn to the plight of refugees, if I could. Millions of Afghans have been displaced by the dangerous conditions in Afghanistan. The International Office of Migration, the IOM, estimates the number of internally displaced persons in Afghanistan at 6.5 million, with Iran hosting 4.5 million refugees and 3.7 million refugees in Pakistan, and another almost 50,000 refugees in surrounding countries that used to be part of the Soviet Union. The government of Pakistan earlier this month began sending undocumented Afghans back to Afghanistan, as we've mentioned previously. Over 1.5 million people may be affected by this new policy, and both the IOM and the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, have appealed to Pakistan to reconsider this policy and to continue giving protection to Afghans. Given the severe human rights restrictions that the Taliban has placed on women and girls, what kind of conditions await those who are going to be forced back from Pakistan to Afghanistan?
The important thing is that why Pakistan make this urgent decision. Most of the time, especially during the 4 decades, the Pakistan used refugees as a political tools. Most of the time when there is something happened between Afghanistan and Pakistan, the Pakistan said to refugees to go to Afghanistan. Right now in Pakistan, the situation is very bad. The Pakistani police enter to Afghan refugees' houses at the middle of the night. And it's not important for them. There is a kids, there is a woman or something else. They enter and they told to the family, bring your documents. And in the many areas in Pakistan, in all over the Pakistan, the police also have a very bad behavior with the Afghan refugees. Most of the time, they told to Afghan refugees, if you have document, it's good. Otherwise, give me the money. At the same time, in some areas, the Pakistani police arrest the female, up the kids, and they send them to the custody, and they divide the families in Pakistan, and they start searching house by house. And the other side, the Taliban said, welcome. We have already 38 million hostages in Afghanistan already. Send these refugees as also to us. It's not important for us. And the Taliban don't have this capacity to accept about 1.4 million refugees just from Pakistan. So it is the crisis. It's humanitarian crisis, because most of these families are not prepared to go to Afghanistan. At the same time, there's winter season in Afghanistan. So if they send them according to international organization report, like IOM, like UNHCR, 60% of these refugees are kids. So this will be a very big problem. The international community, including UNHCR, asked so many times to Pakistan to stop the deportation of these Afghans. The other thing which is very, very important, those refugees, including me, those who come after the 2021, and right now they are in Pakistan, if the Pakistan send them back to Afghanistan, the Taliban announced we have a very important committee. We make a committee of intelligence. Those refugees who came from Afghanistan, from Pakistan to Afghanistan, so we make biometric of these refugees. At the same time, we also investigate who are you when you go to Pakistan and why you come to Afghanistan. So these are the things that will create a big problem, especially for those refugees who leave Afghanistan, like the previous government people like the judges, like the journalists, like the human rights defender, like the women rights defenders. So all of these people right now in Pakistan, if they deport, if they send them back to Afghanistan, so that will be a very, very important and easy target for the Taliban to arrest these people, to torture these people, and also to put them in the jail. So this is a big, big problem, as I think.
Thank you for that. It certainly sounds like the international human rights community needs to keep a very close eye on what's going to happen in Afghanistan to these asylum seekers who've been forced back and these refugees who are facing refoulement back into Afghanistan. One of the restrictions I understand on women in Afghanistan is that women are prohibited from applying for a passport or from leaving the country unless they have a male escort, a mahram, going with them. This must make it very difficult for some women, and as we've mentioned, there are many women who want to leave the country, the former government officials, other educated women, these women who are going to be sent back after having already sought asylum in Pakistan. Um, do you know of any tales of hardship of women who have attempted to leave Afghanistan or have had difficulties resettling in the new places where they've gone to? Are there any specific stories you could relay to us? Thank you.
One of the ladies by the name of Elaha Delawarzoy, she were in Afghanistan, and one of the spokesperson of the Interior Ministry of the Taliban raped her, and after that said to the people, I marry her. So this lady were under the control of this person by the name of Qari Said Khusti, were in Kabul, and she find an opportunity and she made a video of herself and put in the social media. After that, some organization made this opportunity for Elaha Delawarzoy to leave Afghanistan and came to Pakistan. Finally, she find an opportunity. She left Pakistan and came to Pakistan. The Taliban find her in Pakistan and sent them back to Afghanistan. As you mentioned, in the passport area, I would like to share one very important experience of myself. I applied for my daughter for the passport at the Taliban embassy here in Pakistan. So after all of the process was done by my wife, I didn't go to the embassy because I afraid for that the Taliban, most of the people told us that in the embassy, they find people. So after 15 days, when my wife go to the embassy and ask them, give me my daughter passport, they issue the passport after 15 days. They told them that your daughter passport is not printed so far. After 1 month, 2 months, my wife go to the embassy regularly. Finally, when my wife told them, why you didn't give my daughter passport? They told her to my wife that your daughter last name was important for us. We sent this passport for the investigation. Up to now, we didn't receive this passport. And I have the bill and I have the receipt. Like me, there was 2, 3, and 4 another journalists as well that they didn't issue the passport to these people. So it shows that they specifically mention all those people who are under the target of the Taliban. I would like to share, after the collapse of government, especially in 2023, I have about 15 to 17 media discussions, which is about the human rights violation and freedom of speech with the national medias and international medias. So this is the problem that the Taliban focus on these issues, and they didn't give me my daughter passport so far.
Well, thank you for that. I see that someone has written in with a question saying, thanks for a very informative session. My understanding is that Taliban means students in Arabic. So was Taliban a youth movement? And the average age in Afghanistan is 18, and 2/3 of the people in Afghanistan are under 25. What does this mean regarding how young men in Afghanistan view women? This is a question from Robert Adams. Thank you.
Yeah, the Taliban means students from the religious schools, like the madrasas. The leadership of Taliban, the age of these people are maybe about 15 or 16. So some of the youths, especially the new generation of the Taliban, I had a discussion with them. Right now, they are thinking, especially the youth, the Taliban encouraged them that we bring Sharia to Afghanistan. They have their own rule in Afghanistan right now. They are not thinking that we want Sharia just in Afghanistan. They said that we would like to have our government in all over the world. After Afghanistan, we want Sharia in Pakistan and the Middle East and the other countries. And the leader of all of these government, just one person, which is right now by the name of Mullah Hibatullah. You know, when the Taliban take over in Afghanistan, the situation automatically changed in Pakistan. There is another group by the name of TTP with the same ideology. The Taliban motivated this Islamist group in all over the world. When the Taliban said we defeat United States and other countries, so it's very easy for us to control the Pakistan and establish our own government in Pakistan. You know, every day in Pakistan right now, there is 5 to 10 attacks in several areas. All of these attacks, which are done by the TTP, which is called Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. In the first, we had TTA, Tehrik-e-Taliban Afghanistan, which is changed to Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. Right now, this group in Pakistan is very active. I think in the future, there will be another group by the name of TTI, Tehrik-e-Taliban Iran, or maybe TTT, Tehrik-e-Taliban Tajikistan. With the same names, I think they will start their activities like they start in Pakistan. Because in the 20 years, these two parties by the same names, TTA and TTP, they are working together in Afghanistan. Most of the Taliban were the guests of TTA, which is Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. Right now, the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan said to Taliban, you were the guest of us during the 20 years. Right now, it's your turn, that you are the host and we will be the guest. So the situation will be very dangerous in the future, as I think.
Well, you leave us on a rather chilling note to think that the program of the Taliban could extend to Pakistan and Iran. But I want to thank you so much for this interesting and elucidating look into Afghanistan, the human rights situation there, the situation of journalists, the situation of women. And I hope very soon that you get your visa and that you and your family, wife and children are able to join us here in New Jersey. And we all look forward to being able to benefit from your insights at another future time. Thank you so much for this interview. And thank you,
Thank you so much,
Maricela Rivera, for setting up this Zoom meeting as part of International Education Week at FDU. Thank you.